Game developers have a high hurdle to jump over when developing a cartridge game for the Tandy Radio Shack color computer. Not only do they need to know the inner workings of the CoCo to exploit it to the max, they also need to have the know-how to design and manufacture the physical cartridge. The Game Master Cartridge, or GMC, removes this hurdle because it allows developers to concentrate on the software, not the hardware. Still, there is another hurdle. How do you get started with the GMC? What development tools can be used and how? This session aims to guide the developer in the right direction, giving him or her an idea of one type of development cycle. There are many ways, and each developer likes having his or her unique setup. What is presented here is but one way to do this. What is not presented is how to program the GMC. The scope of the session is to show one way to set up the development environment. Detailing the use of the functionality of the GMC is a whole other story. The tool chain consists of three major modules: the editor, where the program source is entered, the assembler that creates the machine language file, and the environment, where the machine language program will run. We'll be using Notepad++ for the editor, LWSM for the assembler, and XRoar for the CoCo environment. One huge advantage of this setup is that it is virtual. The developer does not have to burn a single EEPROM, have a real GMC, or even have a real CoCo to develop a complete game for the GMC. Let's see what we need to do to set this up. Let's set up the XRoar emulator. To do this, we go to this web page right here. A page similar to this is going to display, and from here we're going to select the link that corresponds to the windows that we have. I have 64-bit Windows, so I would use this link right here. Let's do that right now. Try clicking the link on the PDF. Here it opens up. In some cases, the PDF reader might ask for permission. Just go ahead and give it. And here is the page. And where we need to go is exactly to this window zip archive. As I mentioned before, I need to use the 64-bit Windows. I'll go ahead and click the link. This downloads the zip file. Once it's downloaded, we just need to open it. Since I'm using the Chrome browser, I can just go ahead and click it here. The zip file contains one folder, so what we're going to do is that we're going to copy this folder somewhere else. So I'm just going to right click and I'm going to get copy, and then I already have another Explorer window all ready to go here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the root of the C drive. So I'm going to paste that. And one more thing, I'm just going to rename this to something a little shorter. I'm just going to call it XRoar. So now if we go inside here, these are the files that are needed to run the emulator. However, this emulator will not run just yet because it needs ROMs. It turns out that the firmware that the color computer uses, for example, Color Basic, Extended Basic, Disk Basic, so forth, is not included in the package. So we have to go get those. Let's do that now. We're back to our document. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here. Here's the listing of the files we just saw that were included in the XRoar zip. And here is where we're going to get our ROMs. So what we're going to do is that I'm going to click the PDF here. And here is the little message that is asking for our permission to open it. So I'm going to allow it. And here it is. So what we're going to do is that we're going to go into the basic OS. This contains a disk, the disk ROM, so we're not going to use disk right now for this example or this exercise. So I'm going to click on basic. The two ROM files that I'm going to need are this one, 13 or 1.3, so I'm going to click that, and it's downloading, and I'm going to click the Extended Basic 1.1. So now that is downloading. Now I'm going to open the containing folder. So in Chrome I can do this and show in folder. Now in the download folder I'm going to select each one. I'm going to hold down the control key and I'm going to select the second one. Now that they're selected, I am going to right click, and from the context menu I am going to select cut to move them. Now I navigated back to the folder where I have my XRoar files, and I'm just simply going to right click and I'm going to paste. And now I have the 2 ROM files that I need. Having all the files, we're now ready to test it. So I'm just going to take the executable and I'm going to double click it. And there it is. To exit, just file and quit. I'm now back at the PDF document. Now one of the things that we need to know to be able to use the GMC is that we have to actually plug it in, so to speak. So to do this with XRoar open, we're going to select hardware, then cartridge, and then we're going to select the game's master cartridge. This is a bit of a problem because, as it mentions here, this is not persistent. So that means you're going to have to do it every time that you open XRoar. But there's a solution for that. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a configuration file for the XRoar environment. And what this configuration file is, it's going to translate the keyboard, because we want the CoCo keys to be nicely mapped to the PS2 keyboard that we're using. Secondly, we're going to define a GMC cartridge. So we're using these commands that XRoar allows us to use. We're going to tell it that it's a cartridge type of a GMC, and we're going to call it a GMC Development. This is something that we can choose what we want. This is a predefined, or you might call it a reserved word. Next, we're going to have a pound or a hash sign here, which means that this line is commented out. This is the CartROM command or directive, and basically here is where you specify the ROM file that the cartridge is going to run. But right now we're not going to have any ROM, so we don't want that. And finally, here's the last directive, which is the no cart auto run. Usually when we plug in a cartridge in the color computer and we turn it on, it automatically runs whatever ROM is there. But the thing is, we don't really want that right now because there's not going to be any ROM. We just have the cartridge plugged in and that's it, but without any kind of ROM code. So this directive tells XRoar to not try to auto-run whatever ROM code isn't there. So that's always a good thing. Finally, we have these two. We have the default machine, which we're going to use the CoCo 2B. This the last US stands for United States, so we're going to emulate the United States CoCo 2B. And finally, we're going to select the default cartridge as being the GMC Dev. Doing this is the equivalent, basically, of doing the cartridge and then selecting the cartridge from this list. Once this configuration file takes effect, XRoar is going to display an additional item in this menu, which is our GMC Development. So let's do that now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the text directly from the PDF, and I'm going to copy it, and then I already have a notepad ready to go. So here it is, and I am going to paste it, and there it is. Now I'm going to save it. I have to save it. Let's see, where's the save? Right here. And I am going to navigate to the XRoar folder. So I am going to select this PC, local disk C. Here is XRoar, and here's where I'm going to save it. Now this has to have a specific name. First of all, it can't be .text. So we're going to go over here and we're going to select all files. And here's the name, XRoar CONF. So I'm going to click this once, but I have to get rid of that example text. So I'm going to remove that, and then I'm going to save. So now that is what we need to do. What I'm going to go ahead is I am going to go back to the XRoar folder, and I'm going to run XRoar again. And there it is. But now when I choose hardware and machine, it's already the Tandy CoCo 2B. When I choose cartridge, as you notice, the last item here is GMC Development. So we know that our configuration file is working. Our next activity is installing the editor, which we had mentioned is going to be Notepad++. Back here in the PDF document, there is a link. So we're going to follow that link. We are again going to give permission to open it. And here we go. So we have the downloads. We are going to click always the latest release. And since this is a 64-bit Windows, I am going to get the installer with the other computer, and as it is documented in the PDF. I downloaded this because that's what I'm using for my development machine. But in this machine where I am trying all this out and showing you how to do it, I have Windows 64. So let's download that. Please ignore all of these buttons. These buttons are no good. Don't click them. All of these. So just stay on the side here. Okay, so I'm going to get the installer. Alright, the installer is ready, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to click it once to get the installer running. I'm going to give permission to go ahead with that. I'm going to choose English. I'm going to go pretty fast through this because this is pretty standard installation procedure. Agree. I don't care, it could be there. I don't care again, it could be the defaults. Create shortcut on desktop, we can do that. And go ahead and install. Luckily the install is quite fast. I did not have to speed up the video. Run Notepad, yeah sure, go ahead, run it. It doesn't matter. And here we have Notepad. Okay, so here we have Notepad++. The interesting part about this application is that it supports a huge amount of languages. In fact, it supports so many languages. The menu actually just presents the first letter of their name in alphabetical order. Like for instance, in A we have Ada, we have assembly, we have all of those. If we go to C, we have C, C#, C++, and so forth. And the problem is that we are going to be using 6809 assembly language, and that is not included in this list. Quite frankly, this says assembly, but I'm not sure exactly to which processor or which assembler this language is fine-tuned. It just so happens that this is not a problem because there is a file out there that we can add to Notepad++ to add the 6809 assembly language to this list. Now this file, going back to the PDF, was first created by Steve Bamford and later was modified by Paul Fiscarelli. I believe he made changes that made it a little bit more specific to the color computer. So this is the file that we're going to go and get. So what we're going to do is we're going to again click this guy, we're going to allow, and that's going to open the necessary page. We're going to go to the option to download the zip, which is right here, and I am going to click it. And there it is downloading. And ta-da-dum. Now I am going to click it to open it. And here is the file that we want. It's an XML file. So we're going to copy this file. The question is, where do we copy it to? The truth is, it doesn't really matter, but let's be a little organized about this. So what I'm going to do is I am going to select it. I am going to copy it. I right click that. I'm going to open the XRoar folder and I'm going to go one up. So I'm here in the root folder of the drive, of the C drive, and I'm going to create another folder, new folder, and I'm just going to call it CoCo Dev. I'm going to go inside and I'm going to put it there. There we go. Perfect. So now we're going to go back to Notepad must not forget that. We're going to go back to the language menu where we had all of this list. We're going to go down and we're going to select user defined language and define your language, because that's exactly what we're going to do. So this pops up. I believe that when you run Notepad++, the first time it docks it. I can do that right here. So that's the way it would look. So what we're going to do is we're going to import, and we're going to navigate to our CoCo dev folder, which is right here, and we're going to select the XML file. And that was quick. Import successful. So now we're going to go OK. Now to close this, I just undocked and I closed. And now if we go to language and we go way down here, oh sorry, I believe I need to restart it, so let's do that. Okay, we go to language, and there we go, 6809 assembly. So now we have Notepad++ ready to go for our assembly language programs. Okay, I'm back at the PDF document. The next activity is to install LWTools. This is a tool set for color computer development. It was written by William Astle, and we are going to use specifically the 6809 assembler that comes with this tool set. So we're going to click this, we're going to allow it, and it's going to open up yet another page. And here we have. Now what we're going to do is that we are going to scroll down a little bit, and it turns out here that Tormod has already put together some Windows binaries for us. So we're going to go here, and here are all the versions that are available for download. We want to use the newest one, which is 4.18. Now in my case, I'm going to download this guy, but before I do, I need to comment something. That when I wrote the article, that is the PDF that you're reading, 4.18 was not available for Windows 32. So the article goes into detail to actually go back one, 4.17. The difference between these two versions isn't really mind-blowing. It's just, you know, more bug corrections and a few features, stuff like that. So it's okay to use the 4.17 Windows 32, but it's not needed anymore, because Tormod was kind enough to actually put together a Windows 32 version of the 4.18 LWTools. So having this, obviously I recommend using 4.18 instead of 4.17. Well, having said that, I'm going to click this guy and it's going to download it. Alright, it's done downloading, so I'm going to click it here to open the zip. And what we have here is just a folder. We're going to copy it and we're going to put it in that CoCo dev that I created. So now I'm going to go look for that. Here it is, CoCo dev, and I'm just going to put it here. Paste. And I am going to rename it just so that it is shorter. There it is. If we go inside this folder, we're going to see the tools that are available. We don't need to do anything further. We are done with setting up LWTools. Before we move forward, I would like to test to make sure that our GMC development environment is working as it should. So what we're going to do is that we're going to run this small program. Let me discuss this just a little bit. These two first lines, what they do is that they enable the cartridge sound. The color computer can have 4 different sources of sound. One of those sources is actually disabled, so in reality it's only 3. They can come from the cassette, they can come from the digital analog converter that's inside the color computer, or they can come from the cartridge. These first 2 lines, what they do is that they enable the sound from the cartridge. Oh, I can't get that to select. There we go. The next 4 lines actually set the volume. Here's something very interesting about the sound chip, that when you enable the sound chip, the thing blares at full volume. So it's not going to be quiet once the sound source is enabled in the first 2 lines. So what these other 4 lines do is that they actually set the volume to somewhere around 50%, give or take. These 2 lines, all they do is that they create a pause so that the user can press enter to continue. And these last 4 lines, what they do is that they silence the GMC cartridge. They do that simply by lowering the volume all the way down. Now, I might have chosen to actually use something along this line. As much as these 2 lines select the audio cartridge, these 2 lines can also be used, obviously with different values here, to select the DAC from the color computer. So this in effect would actually silence the GMC. So it's really a choice of whether you want to put the volume to 0 and have the cartridge sound continue to be enabled, or you can just enable the sound source from somewhere else and silence the cartridge that way. So what we're going to do is that we are going to select the entire program and we're going to copy it to the clipboard. Now I am going to go to Notepad++. I am going to start a new file and I am going to paste the source here. Now I'm going to, oh wait a second, where am I going to save it? Okay, so now let's do something else. I'm back here in the CoCo Dev folder, so I'm going to create another folder for my basic files, and I'm just going to call it BAS. So now we have a place to save. I'm going to minimize that, and now we can proceed to that, and we are going to save it. We are going to go to that specific, gotta find it, to that specific folder. So here is CoCo Dev and here is BAS, and we are going to call it whatever we want. GMC test is good enough. I gotta get rid of that. .bas. Now here I chose all uppercase just to make it CoCo friendly, but at this point I think that you can use a mix of either lower or uppercase characters. So I am going to save. Now how are we going to get this into the XRoar environment? Well, if we go back to the PDF and we scroll down a bit, I'm just going to go straight down to the image. We can be in XRoar, we can load, we can go to wherever the file is saved, and in this case it's here, GMC test.bas, and we could select this, either double click it or click it once to select it and then open, and then finally use cload in XRoar. Now it's something very interesting. When you use the load function in XRoar for a basic program, you actually load the program into XRoar, but you do not load it into the basic environment or the color computer environment, whichever one you want to call it. So now we use cload, and cload takes the file that's loaded into XRoar and actually loads it into the basic environment. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get XRoar started. So I'm going to go down here. I am going to select the CoCo Dev, and I am going to go back, and here's XRoar. In fact, let's do something. Let's move XRoar. Let's cut it out of here and let's put it in the CoCo Dev folder, just so that we don't have to be bouncing back and forth and everything is centralized in one location. So we go into XRoar and we are going to run it. So here we have our color computer environment. We're going to go File, we're going to go Load. Now we're going to navigate to wherever we have the basic file, which in cocodev.bas, and here it is. So I'm just going to double click it. So now it is loaded into XRoar. Now to load it into the basic environment, we do cload, it's doing something, and now if we list, there it is. So now let's run it and see what happens. Okay, I am getting a sound, a definite hum. I am now going to press the enter key, and the hum silences. In my case, I can still hear a little bit of a noise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type some nonsense text, and I'm going to press enter. That generates a syntax error, and that completely silences the cartridge. We are almost ready to put together our first assembly language program. But before we do that, I want to set up our development environment. Right now we have the tools. We know that the CoCo environment is working correctly with the GMC cartridge, but I want to put something else in between so that we can have a more fluid motion from the time that we type in our assembly language program to the time that we actually test it in the CoCo environment using XRoar. Now this section here talks about organizing the folders. We've already done most of it. In fact, the only thing that's missing is the ASM, so we can go ahead and do that right now. Alright, so we're in XRoar, so I'm going to go up one, and I'm just going to new folder ASM. So that has that ready now. The next part is to put together this batch file. That's going to help us a lot when we are assembling our program. This basically keeps us from having to run the assembler manually. The assembler is a command line tool. So the way that we would have to do it is we enter the program in Notepad++, then we open the command window, then we type in the assembler command line. After that is done, we go into XRoar to test. So this batch file sort of automates some of that process. I'm going to select the text that's in the PDF file. In my case, it was a little difficult selecting it, all of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do it in pieces. So I'm going to copy. Now I'm going to go back to Notepad++, and I'm going to create a new tab. Oops, there we go. So I am going to paste it. I'm going to put an enter here, and I'm going to go back to the PDF. Then I'm going to select the next part. If you can do it all in one fell swoop, that's a lot better. So see, I'm having trouble here. So I am just going to copy that, and I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to get rid of that extra colon. I'm going to go back to the PDF, and I'm going to select the rest of it. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it here, and it's all done. Now I can save it. I'm going to save this file in the CoCo Dev folder. So I am going to save. There we go. I'm going to go up one. Now obviously this has to be a batch, so I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm just going to call it asm2bin.bat. Have lots of options here, all types. There we go. Save. So now if we go back to the CoCo Dev, I now have asm2bin. I want to have some discussion on this file, so let me go back to Notepad++. I just want to mention one thing. This batch file can accept 1 or 2 parameters. If it only accepts 1, then it's going to assemble the source to a bin file that is executable within the basic environment. The second parameter is just a flag that can be anything, and when it is present, it actually tells the batch file to assemble to a raw bin file that will be used as a ROM image. So we just need to keep that in mind. In my examples, I ended up using the second parameter as ROM, just to make it clearer, but in fact that could be anything. It could be the number 1, it could be ABC, it could be whatever you want. And here is where it tests for it. You can't see it because of the orange, but it's there. It's testing for the second parameter, and the second parameter is blank. It just goes to the bin file, which is right here. And here's where it assembles for a bin file for the basic environment. And if it isn't blank, it just falls through, and here it assembles a raw image for the ROM cartridge. Okay, so what's next is configuring this batch file for our own individual setup. As you can see, there's 3 path specs here, which indicate the full path of a folder, including the drive letter. So I need to change this to C. I'm sure that most likely that will have to be modified in most installations unless you actually have an E drive. Okay, so now that we have this modified, we can go ahead and save it. And now we're ready to actually type in our first assembly program. Alright, so first I'm going to go back to the PDF and I'm going to look for the listing. Here it is. Here's a good listing. So I am going to select it. That shouldn't be much of a problem because I have everything in one page. Perfect. So now I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to Notepad++, and I'm going to open a new tab. I am going to paste, and there it is. As you can see, the formatting did not come through, so I'm going to go ahead and format it, and I'll be right back. Okay, it's formatted. I just want to talk a little bit about this little teeny tiny program. First of all, you notice that it has two origins, the C0000, and it has two return statements, a return from subroutine and a return from interrupt. What I tried to do is I tried to actually put this together so that I could assemble it either for the basic environment or the ROM environment. Right now it is set to build for the ROM environment, so let's change that. I'm going to make that a comment, and I'm going to remove the comment here, and I am going to remove this here, and I am going to comment this here. So now it's returning from subroutine, and the origin is 4000 hex. The last statement that's commented here is the fill. The fill is not really necessary for the basic environment, but it is very critical for the ROM cartridge environment. So right now it is as it should be. It should be commented out. So we are about ready to build this. All right, let's save that first. And I'm going to save it in the ASM folder. I am again going to select all file types. It's up around here somewhere. There it is. Okay, and I am going to call it just test01.asm. I'm still using CoCo friendly file names, the 8.3 convention, but it's not really necessary here. So I am going to save it. Everything is set. Good. So I save, and I am ready to build. Okay, so here's where I need to assemble the program to generate the bin file. Usually I would have to open a command line window and run the assembler, but we're going to do something different here. If we go back to the PDF and we go up, we see that Notepad++ has this run option. That when selected, it allows us to define the process to run from within the Notepad++ environment. So that's what we're going to do. And this is the command that I'm going to give it. So I am going to copy that, and I am going to go back to the Notepad++, and I am actually going to use that command. So here it is. I've already typed that in, so it's already in there. And in fact, I fixed it because in the PDF it specifies the E drive, but here in this environment that I'm doing now, it's the C drive. So I fixed that. Now the only thing that I need to do here is to go to this shortcut dialog. I'm not 100% sure why it's called, why it's invoked through the save button. That sort of implies another function, but well, that's beside the point. So I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it launch. Here I don't want to use all caps, so launch ASM to bin. And I'm going to give it a shortcut key, Shift F5. If it conflicts, it will tell you right away. So you'll have to choose a different combination for that. And now just click OK here, and I'm ready to go. So I am going to exit this here, and I'm going to be brave because I'm going to run it right off the top. So now if we do run, you'll notice that our new option is here, launch ASM to bin. But before I do that, I want to go back to the folder CoCo dev. So here it is, and I actually want to create the bin folder. Can't forget that. And I'm just going to leave it lowercase, no problem with that. So now we have the three folders. We have two source folders, one for assembler, one for basic, and we have one bin folder to put in the assembled the assembled file. So I'm going to go into the bin folder. Now I'm back to Notepad++, and I am going to test it. Okay, that's it. So now let's go back to the folder and see if it actually created something. And there it is, test01 bin. So now we're ready to really test it in the XRoar environment. So let's go back to XRoar. It's right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a hard reset to clear that and to make sure everything is good. It's always a good idea to check to make sure that the cartridge is the correct one. That is correct. And that is still correct, so that's good. Now to run the program, we're also going to use the load. So we're going to go back to file load. We're still here in this folder, so we're going to go up one and we're going to go into bin and we're going to select the test. Now there is a big difference between bin files and basic files. The basic files, when they are loaded using the file load instruction in XRoar, they get loaded into XRoar, but they don't get loaded into the basic environment. But with bin files, load does put them into the memory which is accessible to the basic environment. So right now we don't have to do any further loading. We can go ahead and run it. We are now ready to run our machine language program using the exec instruction. If you recall, we had an origin of 4000 because we uncommented this. So we have an origin of 4000 to it. So we need to specify that in the exec. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to type in exec ampersand h 4000. One more. There we go. And I am hearing a hum. I am sorry if this does not come through to the final video, but the hum is there. Now to silence it, I am going to type in some nonsense text. It generates a syntax error and that causes the cartridge to silence itself. We're now ready to create our first ROM code that will execute as a cartridge. So let's go back to Notepad++ and make the necessary changes. The first change is that we need to uncomment the C000 org, and we need to comment out the 4000. We do not want that as much. We also don't want the return from subroutine, so we comment that out, and we uncomment the RTI so that this routine will return from interrupt. And finally, for the ROM cartridge, we need to fill, so we're going to uncomment that. So we are now ready to assemble it. We're going to save it first, obviously. Now we're going to go back into run because we have to make that small modification here for the second parameter. And as I mentioned, I'm just going to put in ROM. I'm going to click save. I'm going to make sure that this is correct. Launch ASM to bin, and obviously I'm going to put this back in. Perfect. See, it mentions that that a conflict is found. All right, so now let's close it, and now let's go back to run, and we are going to launch ASM to bin. That was fast. In fact, that was a little bit too fast for my taste. So let's go back to the folder, to the bin folder to be specific, and you'll notice there's no other file here. If it had assembled correctly, there would be a test01.rom ROM file here, but there wasn't. And this is something that I documented in my article. Maybe there's a way to solve it that I was not able to figure, but the quick and dirty way that I found was simply removing. First, I'm going to go back to run, and I want to select that, and I'm going to put it into the clipboard because I'm still going to need this. But then I'm going to X out of here. Then I'm going to go to run, and I'm going to say a modify shortcut or delete command because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete it. So here it is. I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to click delete. I'm going to confirm it, and it's gone. So now I am going to close Now I'm going to go back to run. That's still there, that's good. So, and the ROM thing is still there, that's good, the second parameter. So now I'm going to save here, and I'm going to redefine the shortcut. I'm going to leave it as is, Shift F5, and of course I'm going to type that back in, launch ASM to bin, and I'm going to go OK on that, and I'm going to close this, and now let's try it again and see if that works. This is re-added here, so that's good. Okay, that was still kind of fast, but let's see what it did. Okay, it worked. There it is, test 01 ROM. Okay, so that's good. Now on to the next step. The next step is to modify the XRoar configuration file. Let me minimize this. We're back at Notepad++. Okay, so I don't have the configuration file open here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it. Okay, I'm in a good place here. I'm just going to go to XRoar, and I'm going to open the XRoar com file. And here it is. Now the changes that I need to make is to specify where I have my ROM cartridge. And I need to specify the cart outer run. So I'm going to get rid of the prefix no dash. So that's there. Just let me put some, I'm just going to do this real quick. Okay, everything else stays the same. We just need to set the correct file specification for this. So let's go back to bin. We know it's called test1 ROM. So I'm going to right click this area here, and I'm going to copy address as text. I'm going to go back to Notepad++. Now I am going to paste whatever is in the clipboard there. So there it is, C cocodev.bin. So now I'm going to type in the program name .rom. Okay, something else here. You might have noticed that I used a /, and that's because XRoar will not work if you use the backward slashes that Windows uses. So we need to change those. And I believe we are ready. We're going to save this file. We're going to go back to XRoar, and we're going to do a hardware reset. Since we modified the XRoar configuration file, we actually need to restart the application. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to quit. I'm going to go back to the folder. There it is, XRoar. So I'm going to run it again. This time it should pick up the modifications in the configuration file. And there it is. For me, it is now emitting a hum. So that is coming directly from the cartridge. And if I want to stop it, again, I just type in any nonsense text and I generate a syntax error, and that silences the cartridge. So there it is, our first cartridge ROM software. Thank you.